I actually did the math the other day. I actually spent about $2,000 a year on software or digital subscriptions. That doesn't include food or utilities or any of that. And I'm actually below the average. And that's by the way, personal spending. It's not Slidebean. Slidebean actually spends like $40,000 a month on subscriptions because subscriptions have become a monthly tax. It's the monthly cost to live in our internet heavy lives. It's what we have to pay for music or for any TV content these days. And it wasn't always like this. And many subscription services have made our lives a lot easier. But the ultimate truth is that subscriptions are getting people to spend more, a lot more than they used to. And that number is growing fast. The average American spends $300 a month on subscription services, up from $237 in 2018. And that's not gonna slow down. In the US, more households have Amazon Prime subscriptions than those who decorate a Christmas tree or who go to church, that's for real, or who have any pets. Subscriptions are a money machine. Companies of all kinds are jumping on the subscription trend, and it's gone all the way to car companies trying to charge $15 a month for heated seats. Hold on, this is a real story. This is BMW that now is trying to charge people for heating on the seats of their car. So this is a feature that the car has. The seats are heated, but you can only use that if you pay their $15 a month subscription. It's insane.
Everything has become a service.
From makeup to meals can be delivered to your door.
It's getting out of hand.
And it's not gonna stop. The economics for subscriptions are just too good. The model makes sense incredibly for both of us, the client and the business. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the internet as we know it today relies on subscriptions as a business model. And subscriptions rely on psychology, on human nature, on FOMO to thrive with consumers, but they also happen to be a perfect business model for the company. Much more compatible with how businesses actually operate in real life. So this is the story of why everything has become a subscription now. Now, it was just a few months ago that Elon Musk announced Twitter Blue. Internet blew up, ranted about it, and really only a tiny percentage of Twitter users have adopted Twitter Blue. But its small success was enough for Meta to plan to do the same for Instagram. When subscriptions to daily, to mundane consumer products first appeared in the market, we went crazy for them. Remember Dollar Shave Club when it first came out?
Are the blades any good? Our blades are f***ing great.
And food and beauty products, it was so convenient, and oh boy, when Netflix came out.
And hey, Netflix shows up. Millions of DVDs are flying through the mail.
Go to Netflix.com, make a list of the movies you want to see.
DVDs in the mail to entertaining the entire world.
Simple and convenient. Paying just $10 a month for all of these movies? Way better than just paying $10 for one of them. Logically, it makes sense. Psychologically, it makes sense. But also financially, it makes a ton of sense for companies. And that's all because of three simple letters. LTV. LTV makes subscriptions a killer business model. Now, LTV stands for customer lifetime value. And it's the most important number that you'll need to understand to make sense of everything that I'm gonna say in this video. How much are you worth to Netflix or to Google? But let's take a product like Microsoft Office, the backbone of businesses and offices around the world. In the old days, you would have to purchase your own box license of Microsoft Office to use it, a single one payment. Microsoft, of course, would try to get you to upgrade this with new features and a new Clippy, but overall, your lifetime value was the price of one package, one license, and maybe an upgrade years down the line. Maybe you skip the next version, maybe you pirate the next version, but there was no way for Microsoft to predict that you would buy their next box of software. They had to settle for a lifetime value of one package, which by the way, wasn't cheap either. It's not a decision that people would make lightly. It's hundreds of dollars. However, after they sell you the box with the CD and such, Microsoft still had costs to support that software that you already bought, you already paid for. So that LTV that they collect needs to be enough to cover the marketing costs leading up to your purchase and the cost of running the platform afterward. And that cost might be updates or troubleshooting, the occasional customer support call, patches every time there's a new virus. So this was by all means an ongoing cost funded by that original transaction.
Let's compare a few different companies. A mattress company, for example. A mattress company can only really monetize their customers every, maybe 10 years or so. LTV is probably easy to calculate, but maybe not as relevant to like those monthly, quarterly business decisions, at least not as important as for a subscription company. So another example, a meal kit company. For them, customer loyalty means monthly revenue from delivering those meal kits to customers. They have, to some degree, predictable revenue. However, there's really nothing tying their subscribers to a particular meal kit provider. It's easy, very easy for their subscribers to cancel their subscription. And for a SaaS company like Teamwork, for example, a project management tool, LTV is absolutely crucial. SaaS businesses really rely on LTV to make both short-term and long-term decisions, for example, around spending, marketing, and acquisition budgets.
When products like Microsoft Office became subscriptions, a lot of things changed in a customer's mindset about them. It's no longer a purchase decision worth hundreds of dollars. It's just $10. They also pair that with this ongoing account feature, like cloud storage. So there's this perception that there's this ongoing benefit that you'll need to continue paying for. But more importantly, regardless of how much you've paid for this, that product will never be yours. Never. The economics of that product changed massively. Now, converting you is easier because the barrier is lower. You never own the product, which means that as long as you need it, you will need to be paying for it. And Microsoft made bank with this.
Imagine, connect, discover. Welcome to your modern office.
The key to all of this is predictable revenue. A product like Microsoft Office probably has a very, very low churn rate.
Churn refers to the rate at which a business is losing customers or revenue through subscription cancellations. So once you have your churn rate, then you can calculate your LTV, right? LTV, the estimate revenue you'll receive from the average subscriber over their lifetime. So LTV equals, that's average revenue per account divided by customer churn rate. And as you mentioned, a product like Microsoft Office is a really good example because they have probably a very low churn rate. If Office had a churn rate of 1%, that means the average lifetime value of a user becomes $1,000. And once, like Microsoft, you can deal with thousands of users, you can get very accurate and predictable numbers. So Microsoft knows that they can spend hundreds of dollars to bring in that customers. Why? Because in the end, it will be worth $1,000 to them. And they know that based on the behavior of really millions of other customers, and they can trust that number to make those business decisions.
Now, the business of subscriptions is really equivalent to understanding data. When you're dealing with lifetime values that span over months or years, the smallest improvement can make or break a business. Now, this is of course my bread and butter. We've been doing it for almost 10 years, running Slidebean. And also, in part, I understand it because of the company that we've used since the get-go to track all this stuff. ChurnMogul is, to me, hands down the best subscription tracking platform out there. It's slick, it's intuitive, and it makes these metrics simple to understand for anyone running a subscription business. And they, of course, sponsor our video today, but truly, we've used them long before they sponsored any video, and I can't recommend them enough. Speaking of LTV, for example, ChurnMogul lets you, for example, view the lifetime value of your customers based on the marketing source, the marketing campaign that brought them in, or based on their region, or based on the month when they originally converted. And it's all visual and intuitive for everybody in your team to explore the data. You can also customize your dashboard and even create your own charts to focus on dozens of other key subscription metrics beyond lifetime value. Sign up is free. The product is free if you have under $10,000 in monthly subscriptions. And after that, it is very reasonably priced depending on your company size. Now, you can use the link in the description to grab a special discount for Slidebean viewers. And with that, let's get back to subscriptions beyond software, because software is really just the tip of the iceberg here. Everything is a subscription now. We could probably classify or simplify these groups in two large areas. Content media software, which that's digital goods, newspapers, Netflix, gaming, educational, fitness content, and then consumer or consumable goods. That's beauty or healthcare or pets or clothing. You could probably include food and beverage here. I'm not including utilities here, by the way, because that's a subscription that you're never gonna escape anyway. But let's talk about consumer goods first. You would think that this is a new concept, a whole new trend of the 2020s, but actually, people have been subscribing to consumer goods for centuries. In the 1800s, milk deliveries were a subscription. I'm not sure if the milkman had a dashboard to track churn, but his farm definitely operated on many of the same principles. The concept here is that it's an ongoing service. People need milk, needs to be fresh every day, and needs to be delivered daily. Moreover, the milkman was probably able to estimate how many cows he would need to breed to keep up with the demand of the town and to plan years ahead. And the milkman in this story sounds like one guy, but by the end of the 1800s, the Borden Dairy Company had become one of the largest dairy producers in the US, delivering subscription milk to your home. They made home deliveries all the way through 1970. Harry and David, for example, offered Fruit of the Month subscriptions, which is also fantastic for seasonal produce. These boomers were onto something. I mean, they had Book of the Month clubs and vinyl record subscriptions, all delivered to your boomer home. And many of them found customers with cold mail, not cold email, cold mail. You might have thought spam is new to us, but it isn't really. Side note, by the way, I spent all of this week answering hundreds of cold emails. Today, right? Because our next video is called precisely this. I answered every cold email I received for 1 week. It's been a nightmare, but subscribe to watch that next week. Anyway, like with many of our stories, we now come to the moment when everything changed. Cue that internet composition.
It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
An online network called Internet.
The A and then the ring around it?
It spans the globe like a superhighway and is called Internet.
So CD Now was among the first. As soon as 1996, they offered CD of the Month subscription and sold online. They were able to beat record stores in pricing, again, because of lifetime value, and they tailored the discs that you would receive based on your music taste. Now, this might echo what Spotify does today, and we're gonna get to Spotify, but this was a whole different beast because you were actually buying the CD. Wine.com did the same thing, 1998, and in 99, BeautyBar.com started a subscription for luxury products. You could call Beauty Bar the millennial parent of Birchbox, Ipsy, Glossybox, BoxyCharm, FatFunBin, Allure Beauty Box, Play by Sephora, Scentbird, Look Fantastic, Medusa's Makeup, Try Beauty Box, Face Story, Petit Vour, The Detox Market, Love, Goodly, Kinder Beauty, Petit Ami, Skincare, Cocotic, Vegan Cuts, Bath TV. And then, of course, you have food.
A recipe for success for the makers of meal kits.
Subscription services to keep big bucks.
The world's leading meal kit delivery company.
60 options on our menu, transforming the food system.
It's no joke. In 2021, people spent $73 billion on subscription e-commerce products, and it's expected to hit $900 billion a year by 2026. But why? Are we really better off getting our products as a subscription? I mean, at a first glance, it might look bad. I mean, you already know how much trash your Amazon boxes generate or how much CO2 the FedEx delivery truck emits. But there's a case to be made that otherwise people would travel to malls instead. There's a case to be made that the economies of scale, the optimization of production pipelines thanks to the predictability of the demand, and even the logistics of these last mile deliveries can be improved if we continue to operate on subscriptions, on all this data. And that might end up being positive, even reducing our footprint, but we're actually spending more. Most studies have found that the relationship that you create with a brand once you have a subscription versus, say, a loyalty program or a traditional membership, it does get you to spend more. More than half of people underestimate how much they're actually spending on online subscriptions. Technology, smart suggestions, LTV estimates, even AI are playing a key factor into how much these companies can get us to spend, which I'm not saying is inherently bad, mind you. I mean, it is your money. Do with it what you want. You're convinced that you need a new PS5 and that makes you happy, go for it. If Amazon suggests the perfect complement to the new camera lens that we've been eyeing for the past few weeks, you're getting better videos in the end. Let's talk about Amazon for a moment. I told you in the US, more households have Amazon Prime than those who decorate a Christmas tree. And Amazon as a company sits at the crossroads of both consumer goods and content subscriptions. As a matter of fact, they're also the biggest platform as a service. Those internet startups in the 90s, they had to build their own servers. They had to buy hardware, they had to build racks, connect them to the internet, and maintain them.
Anton is really starting to sweat.
Yeah, still can't believe you gave the servers a man's name.
Sorry, I couldn't remember your mother's name.
When Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, they had to buy their own servers. They had to rent space to store those servers in a data center. And they were their computers. And that is really the only reason why this guy was in the picture. Nobody does that anymore. You can just hook up to AWS, Amazon Web Services, and rent the server space. They handle the hosting, the managing, their servers for you. You just get to building your product, your company, your code. And that's why starting a tech company is so drastically different nowadays. I guess thanks to subscriptions. This is a subscription. You could count on it as a utility, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say that it has transformed the world as we know it.
Amazon's web server is suffering a crippling outage today and taking parts of the internet with it.
But I've gotten sidetracked. I have to get back to the other kind of subscription. That subscription that you probably hate nowadays. Content subscriptions.
Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime.
Demand for subscription is high for video content. Music streaming
Spotify just reached 200 million paid subscribers.
So the business model for a media company, for a content company, has always been a bit tricky. And yet subscriptions have been key to allow these companies to operate and to survive in this modern world. We're gonna look at 4 specific examples: newspapers, music, a little bit on gaming, and of course the black sheep in the group, the film and television subscription. So the first business-related subscriptions were magazines and newspapers. This is as early as the 17th century, and people subscribed to them, but that was not their main source of revenue. It was actually advertising, and you should never forget who the customer is. Whoever's paying the bills is the customer. And all through the 1900s, for newspapers, you, reader, were not the customer. You were just the side hustle. When the internet first appeared, it was this time of bonanza for newspapers, because in this confusing world of blogs and new news outlets, the trust that these old brands of newspapers had was key to stand apart on the internet. And this really skyrocketed their revenue during the early internet. And then other factors played here, like, for example, newsletters starting to cover new topics thanks to their digital presence, and many news companies merging or consolidating together. But all good things come to an end. And to what an end? Because after the 2008 crisis, a lot of companies had to cut their advertising expense, yes, but by that time, people had been accessing the internet for almost a decade. There were more news sources that people were starting to trust online, but most importantly, new places for these advertisers to spend their money.
Status updates and photos and groups and apps.
It's got 3 million users.
It's a phenomenon that some are calling viral video. One site that's gaining enormous popularity is YouTube.
Now, the downfall of ad revenue for newspapers almost exactly matches the rise of revenue of major social media platforms. Look at how advertising spent on newspapers drops at the same time that advertising revenue for Facebook and YouTube start growing. And so publications looked to this side hustle that they had, the readers, to get some extra revenue, and it has worked. I wouldn't say it worked for everybody, but at least for some examples, it has saved the company. New York Times probably the best example. This is a desperate media company with declining ad revenue that figured out a winning strategy: focus on that online subscription. That means no more free content online. Advertisers are not enough to make up for the cost of producing the news, so they pivoted into subscriptions, and it more or less saved the New York Times. Believe it or not, their revenue is growing again for the first time since that happened. Now, the New York Times readership is particular. Many other print publications are not going to survive this, because in those cases, it seems that their content is not worth paying for. Now, let's look at music. Because subscriptions, i.e. streaming, has also transformed the music industry. Through the early 2000s, the music industry was really suffering. Thanks to Napster, to MP3 files, we started to understand music as a 4 megabyte file, which is harder to convince yourself to buy if it's just this file that you can put in a flash drive. So music piracy was a big and concerning deal at the time, especially based on the convenience, because it was generally easy and not dangerous. You wouldn't face legal consequences if you went and downloaded a song on Napster or Lime. In the early 2010s, we probably hit peak iTunes song sales, where digital purchases made up for 30% of the music industry's revenue, but it was never really enough, because it wasn't convenient enough. And also, when you give people the option to just buy one song versus the whole record of songs, a bunch of songs that you probably don't necessarily like, well, lifetime value goes down. And that explains that drop of revenue in that early 2010s. A model that wasn't good enough for customers, which was buying songs, combined with piracy, which is a model that was illegal, but also not illegal enough or not inconvenient enough. But streaming really came to the rescue. Music streaming is a model that seems to have this perfect, delicate balance between the benefit that you get out of on-demand music and the cost, which is either the cash cost or the time that you have to waste listening to the ads. Almost half of all Spotify monthly users have a subscription, and that makes up by far most of the revenue. It's a subscription that we are very happy to pay for, it seems. In a matter of 20 years, the music industry shifted from 100% physical sales to this vast and growing revenue source from streaming. 2021 was the first time in 20 years where the music industry actually made more revenue than at the start of the century. Over the course of 5 years, streaming reversed this downward trend for the music industry that had them in serious trouble. Funny note, you'll find this uptick in physical sales revenue in 2021, which has nothing to do with COVID, it's actually vinyl. Nostalgia sort of paying off, finally. Anyway, part of the revolution that streaming platforms brought was convincing these dinosaur record companies to accept this new and exciting business model. It's no small accomplishment, especially after their last decision to digitize their libraries to sell individual songs didn't work out. This magic lifesaver business model is really a rev share, and I'll explain it because it's important for what comes next. So for example, in the last quarter of 2022, Spotify made $3.3 billion in revenue from 205 million subscribers and the 200+ million users who just rely on ads. Remember what I said last week about ads being just tax for the poor. They essentially take 30% of that as their own revenue, and the other 70% goes to the record companies and the artists. Now, to get the revenue per song streamed, during that same time, we estimate that Spotify had over 500 billion song streams. So they divide their revenue by the number of streams and end up with a revenue per stream of about $0.004. So in other words, your subscription revenue, your payment, is paid proportionally to the artists that you listen to and to the record companies that represent them, which is honestly a pretty fair model. As for Spotify, the company, this also makes a killer lifetime value. Remember lifetime values? They're still a pretty new company, but knowing that we're probably gonna need streaming services as long as we're gonna listen to music, you could be looking at lifetime values of 30 years for a product that millions of customers use. Now, gaming companies have also adopted a somewhat similar model. There are services like Microsoft's Game Pass or PlayStation Plus that allow you to access a library of games in exchange for this monthly subscription rather than having to purchase those games individually. In my case, they probably make more money because I subscribe with this illusion that I'm gonna have time to play all of this, when in reality, it really takes me 6 months to finish a game, which means that buying the game would have been a much better deal. But content companies like YouTube Premium or Nebula, they also work on this similar rev share model. And overall, it's been a successful transition. And the point of this model is that it works. This model works. It seems to be fair for companies and it seems to be fair for customers. Overall, customers are happy to pay these subscriptions. The transparency of Spotify rev share makes it work for everybody. But that's not the case in TV and film. In TV and film, the economics are completely broken.
$500 million just to stream for a couple of years.
Turns out that the money was an absolute necessity.
So many different platforms doesn't seem to be saving customers that much money anymore.
You'll have as many, if not more, options than ever. Only way you can survive is to be gigantic.
Now, the problem for us is very simple. The experience of online, on-demand content went from being a mess to then being incredibly convenient to then being utter shit again. On movies, for example, the early 2000s was this world of cassette and then DVD collections. And this is a reflection of reality. In 2004, for example, only about 1/4 of domestic film revenue in the US came from the box office. Most of the revenue for a film came from DVD sales. Downloading a movie or pirating a movie was harder than pirating a song, but that didn't stop it. The searches for movie torrents peaked in 2010, but once again, a more convenient way to stream movies came in the 2010s.
DVDs just couldn't keep up. The internet could. Streaming was born, and binge became the new way we watch stuff.
And 2010's Netflix is not like 2023 Netflix. Back then, this was really the only streaming platform, and it had this huge library of content. The convenience was just obvious. It's $7 a month. You get access to this huge set of movies. Most movies were on Netflix at the time. And then in developed countries, $7 a month is nothing. Curiously, that balance doesn't translate in developing countries. In Indonesia, for example, only about 18% of people pay for any streaming service at all, music or film. So $7 a month is a lot more money in developing countries. And even if Netflix adjusts pricing or Spotify, the balance of convenience is very different, in part because there are fewer chances of you getting caught if you're downloading an illegal film or song. But in the US, Netflix grew like wildfire through the 2010s, and contrary to what you would think, it didn't really eat up into the box office revenue. People still went to the movies, that revenue grew, and it was an entirely different experience. But Netflix's business model would become its own demise. Netflix didn't do rev share the way that Spotify did. And this is due to a combination of factors. For example, production costs for films vary drastically. A song more or less costs the same to record, but that's not really the case for movies. And while Netflix didn't really eat up into the box office revenue, it really directly hit DVD sales and rentals. Again, about 70% of its studio's revenue. So Netflix's model is based on a licensing fee. They pay a flat fee to license a film for a few years, either exclusively or non-exclusively. And we really know little about these deals. These deals they're usually quite secretive, but what we do know is that they vary massively from the amount of money, to the terms, to the exclusivity, to the distribution by country. So what happened to movie studios was that they lost control of that distribution. And then to make matters worse, Netflix has always operated like a tech company. So they have behavioral insights on what people want to watch, or percentage of film viewed, which film studios could never dream of matching with their old distribution methods. They also fundraised like a tech company. All through the 2010s, Netflix stock price skyrocketed, so they were positioning themselves as this revolution in entertainment, and this allowed them to eventually fund and produce their own content as their own studio. And so the power relationship between Netflix and the film studios became unbalanced, and this could not stand. And money, really. The biggest barrier to entry on a platform like Netflix was not the technology, it was the IP, access to the content. And with the pockets of major Hollywood film studios, building a platform to stream their own movies is trivial, especially after Netflix paved the way for people to get used to this and adopt cord cutting. HBO now, for example, sucked for a while, but they've redeemed themselves now.
But if you just keep going, you find something new to fight for.
And then so fast forward to 2023, everyone has a streaming service. Hollywood had 6 major studios, often called the Big Six. Disney acquired 20th Century Fox in 2019, which now means we have Big Five. 4 out of those 5 studios now have their own streaming service. It's just great business to have your own streaming platform, rather than just licensing the content to someone else. For Netflix in particular, this has been quite the opposite. The cap in growth, the cap in subscribers seems to be this hard ceiling that they're struggling to break through, which means that their stock is no longer sexy because the company is no longer growing. Less money means content quality drops, add to that competition recouping flagship films and series, more people canceling, LTV dropping, and so on. Now, the psychology of buying a subscription is really pretty remarkable. In this day and age, as these platforms and therefore the series that they produce become this integral part of pop culture, this is quite literally playing FOMO. There's also a real perception aspect. It feels that you're getting more out of your money because $10 gives you access to all of this content, whereas it would only allow you to buy one single movie. You are paying for the variety, which sometimes leads to this sunk cost fallacy.
Wait, the what? The fallacy of sunk cost.
Since you've already paid for it, you might as well use it.
I've already spent this much money or time or whatever. I gotta keep
would you
going.
watch that anyways? Also, once you're subscribed, there's this loss aversion. You don't want to lose access to something that you used to have. In this case, this huge film collection or series collection. And then combine that with the barriers of cancellation, for example, Amazon Prime, which makes it really, really freaking hard to cancel the service. It's paying off for them. Which brings me really to the last point of the video, which is talking about when companies have the capacity to bundle all these needs, to bundle the pain of canceling, like Amazon Prime or Apple did with Apple One. This Apple One plan has bundled music, cloud storage, which is, if you have an iPhone, you absolutely need these days, content and video streaming with Apple Plus, fitness, and gaming, all for these $30 a month subscriptions. On a lifetime value perspective, we're looking at an absolutely killer business model. It's $30 a month, potentially for your entire lifetime, plus the renewed phone that you would have to buy every few years because of the planned obsolescence. In our lifetime, we've witnessed the transformation to a world that operates in subscriptions, and this is a trend that is not going to stop. And honestly, it's such a good business that there's nothing we can do to stop it. Thanks a lot for watching.